Hey everyone, this is Jeremy, and welcome to turn 0 of Pokemon Gold. So this is my first foray into Dominions 5 as far as recording my multiplayer games go, and I thought I'd kick things off with a little bit of an twist. So this is a mod game based off of the Pokemon games. So we click in here, see, so we've got a bunch of different cities, right? Pewter City, Cerulean City, Vermilion City, etc., right? That are all nations in this mod. This is going to be a very big game. I think there are... Oh, crap. I think there's like 13 people in this game. Let me double check real quick. We have... I'll just read them off real quick. So we've got Violet City, Celadon City, Cyanwood City, Saffron City, Ecruteak City, Goldenrod City, Pewter City, Azalea City, Cerulean City, Olivine City, Vermilion City, Viridian City, Cinnabar City, and Atlantis. Because the mod creator is trying to balance things against the regular game. So Atlantis is included in as kind of this just matchup to see how things fare. Spoilers. It's anyways. So that's what 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 people, right? So it's a very big game, right? 14 people. And it's a long game. I can tell you that because I'm recording this a pretty long time after the game has started. And I'm not sure that there is a near end in sight for the game. Though there's been a lot of action. So what this video is going to be kind of an introduction. Basically, I'm gonna go through and discuss the nation that we're playing, and then talk a little bit about maybe some of the basic concepts of what is in the game. But I'm not going to spend a crazy amount of time going over every single nation, right? There's a lot of different stuff in this mod. The mod creator has done a crap ton of work, and I plan to include, hopefully, links to all of their stuff in the description of the video. So if you're curious about things, you want to look things up, this is an older version of the mod, obviously, right? We've been playing for quite some time. The creator has continued to update the mod, so things are very different in newer versions of the mod compared to what they are currently. So just keep that in mind. But just to kind of kick things off, we are going to be playing Cyanwood City, a port of crashing waves. So what I want to do is, this is just a little test game. I kind of want to go through real quick and talk in very brief detail about the general concept of what Cyanwood City is, what some of their strengths and weaknesses are, and I'm gonna talk about it with two perspectives, right? The perspective I had going into the game, and then the perspective that I have now, being 50 plus turns in the game. Okay. And I'm going to go over some of the more unique things. I'm going to go over evolutions, which I think is pretty cool. And I will also go over our pretender design. Okay. So right now we're going to start off just by what Cyanwood City is. And I'm not going to read through all of the different lore bits and everything like that. You are more than welcome to do that on your own time. If I were to do that, this would be a very, 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 very long video. So let's just touch base on things in general. National features, okay? So Cyanwood City's big thing is they're the fighting city, basically. Okay, so we've got things like Machops, we've got things like the Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, Hitmontop series, right? That type of stuff. We've got Mankeys, we got the Poly, trio. And most of what we are based around as far as so we're fighting and we're mostly based around Earth. So if we look at magic, right, we've got really good Earth with a little bit of spread in some other things. Okay. We've got medium nurses. Every single, so just to take this, right, every single city has a nurse. Every single city / nation, right, has a nurse. And the nurse is always a priest too, but they sometimes have different abilities, right? I think they are almost always healer 1, disease healer 1, which is super useful. But some of the other nurses, there are some special nurses, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. One of the things that we do not have very good access to here, right, is we do not have a Divine 3 caster out of the gate. Our Machampions, right, are Priest 2s and actually do have a 50% chance to random another Divine level, right, be Priest 3. So that is one way that we can have Priest 3s for Divine Blessing, basically. Okay? So let's go through these real quick. We're going to do commanders in this, and then I actually have a test game that we will pull up, and I will do the vast majority of the units I'll do in the test game, except for our sacreds, which I will actually pull up in the actual game. So you'll get to see a little bit of a sneak peek there. So let's go through commanders real quick. We're going to look left to right. So we've got a Cyanwood City Silver Black Belt. This is just a scout, 60 stealth, summon allies. So in the beginning of this, as we talk about things, I'm going to tell you, you're going to learn about what the mod is inherently, and as we kind of cover some of the basics, then we'll skip those going forward. So as you can see, right, this commander has units with it, right? He spawns a primate and 2 Mankeys at his side at the start of every battle, and this is indicative of the entire mod. Almost every commander, if not every commander, for the Pokemon nations is going to not only be present, but also spawn a Pokemon with them. And you can augment this. They're all going to have their own different things, except for the actual Pokemon champions themselves. So like this is a Machampion. He doesn't spawn other Pokemon because he is a Pokemon. Right? So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay. So we've got this Silver Black Belt. This is our Scout. Another thing that you're going to see, right, is almost every commander is going to have a Summon Allies, right? So this Silver Black Belt, you can set up to train or capture a Mankey every month, right? And this is a way that you can generate specific Pokemon that you are looking for, okay? So every commander is going to spawn Pokemon at the start of a battle, and every commander, or almost every commander, can capture a Pokemon per turn, right? It's just like if you were doing, like Raise Dead or something like that, okay? So this black belt is a very meh scout. 60 stealth. Mankeys honestly aren't very strong. The one thing that I can say about this is they are incredibly cheap, both actual gold and recruitment and everything like that. Upkeep cost is pretty cheap as well. You can, if you really need to, try to flood the battlefield with these guys. They actually, if you have 10 or 15 of them, which sounds dumb, right? But it actually doesn't cost you much to get that. You can have them roll around as kind of like a little scouting or a little raiding party, right? And 10 or 15 of them is actually not just 10 or 15 of them, but it's 10 primates and 20 Mankeys, right? And those guys, those are going to spawn every single battle. It doesn't matter. As long as the black belt survives, as long as any of the commanders survive, right? These Pokemon that they free spawn at the beginning of the fight, they're just going to come back. No worry about diseases, none of that stuff, right? As long as the commander lives, then you're going to free spawn these units every single battle, which is actually really nice. It's really efficient, okay? But other than that, not really a super interesting unit. Next up is our Battle Girl Rubies. These are amazing units. They're kind of pricey for a scout, but they are stealthy, right? 70 stealthy, and they're flying. And more importantly, they're spies. So you can use these to instill uprisings. And that is a big deal, especially at 70 stealth, because they are harder to actually find to catch. And Hitmonlees, which we will talk about later, they're very expensive units, but they don't cost when they're free spawned by a Battle Girl Ruby, right? You're paying for 40 gold for a Ruby, right? Whereas, let's be honest, this is the Hitmonlee, and it's 72 gold per year, right? So these guys are no, but yes. So that's a very important thing, okay? And as you can see, if there's a temple in the province, they can capture a Hitmonlee each month, okay? So next up, we have the Black Belt Provokers. These are actually assassins, but they are assassin -5, so they're really not very good assassins. And stat-wise, they're also not very good. They're no magic, right? So they can't swarm or anything like that. And Hitmonchans are honestly not super good, especially when you're considering if you're going up against other Pokemon nations. Now, if this was going up against just vanilla nations, it might be a different matter, but against other Pokemon nations, other commanders that you are trying to assassinate are going to have their own Pokemon with them. So a single Hitmonchan is really not going to be that big of a deal, okay? Not a very good unit. The Black Belts, okay? This is also just kind of a very generic, not very good unit, okay? It's not stealthy. It's not a very good leader. It only summons a Machop, which is kind of bad. The only kind of upside to this unit is if you really want to put your Machop production into overdrive, you can get like 10 or 15 of these, 10 or 20 of these, and start having them capture a Machop every month and then use that. But I really, like, they cost 20 gold a year. This is not a good unit. Your Crush Girls, however, very good unit. Have very good leadership, right? For their cost, they actually come with a decent little cadre, a decent little team of Pokemon, 1 Hitmonchan and 1d3 defensive Tyrogues. So that's pretty nice. And they're stealthy 70. So that's very good. So not only are they good leaders, but they can actually lead around stealthy bands of Pokemon, which is super, super nice. Okay? These are your main leaders for Cyanwood. Okay? Next up, we have the Black Belt Commanders. These guys are interesting. They're okay leaders, right? If you need to use them, you can in a pinch, and I do. They're heftier in the gold cost, and especially with the upkeep cost. They do come with a Machamp, which can be very useful, and these are one of, you might have noticed a theme, right? The Pokemon commanders tend to be very unprotected, very low protection, okay? Whereas the Black Belt commanders come with a shield and come with decent protection, etc. They also come with a crazy high siege bonus, and a good patrol bonus and castle defense bonus. And they spawn a Machamp, so very, very nice. However, the one key thing about the Black Belt commanders is that they capture 1 Eevee per month. So if you set these guys, and Eevees are really unique in this mod, but if you set these guys up, they will capture an Eevee every month, which can lead to really cool and interesting things. Okay, So they're pretty interesting, pretty cool. Next up, we have Black Belt Goes. Now, these guys are awesome. Super cheap, priest ones, sacreds, flying, decent stats. Not great stats, but decent stats. Okay? And you can clear them out. They can be mini thugs. And they have multiple attacks already, right? And to top it off, they come with a Hitmonlee, which is a flying unit, and 1d3 offensive TIE Rogues, which are basically baby Hitmonlees, which are also flying units. Okay? So you go into you can send a handful of these in as a very good raiding party, because the Hitmonlees and the offensive TIE Rogues are going to take care of most things. And if you lightly gear them and have a decent bless, these guys are actually pretty potent, right? Not crazy potent, but pretty potent. I will use them. I use them to different effects throughout the games that I've played. They're really good units. They're just really useful units. Okay. The City Nurse it's a freaking healer. I mean, it's a priest 2, which this is your only other priest 2 aside from the Machampion, right? Who is your only potential priest 3. So priest 2 is if you're going to rely on sacreds, which we're not really relying on sacreds, but we use our sacreds a lot, right? But nurses, I mean, the big deal is they're healers. Healer and disease healer is very useful. They're not super expensive. You can preach with them pretty well. Very useful unit in the right situations. What I like to do is I like to have hubs with these, right? And have maybe like 3 or 4 nurses in the hub, so that when I'm cycling armies in and out of locations, I can have nurses on call to heal up a bunch of diseases and wounds and things like that. I prefer to actually have nurses travel with armies, so depending on the game, I will actually send a handful of nurses with an army, and I find that works a lot, but depending on the game, that might not be something that you can do. So, next up we have Cyanwood City Swimmers, which can be recruited in any overwater coastal fort. Okay, and these are interesting, right? These are our water mage access. So now we're kind of into we're into our mages. Okay, so this is a water 1 with a 50% chance at getting fire, air, water, or earth. So most of these are kind of whatever, but you do have a 50% chance of getting a water 2, and we have very easy access to forging items, which means very easy access to a water 3 and potentially 4. Okay, so these are very cheap units that are okay researchers, not great, but okay researchers, and they're amphibians. They can lead Polywag or Poliwrath stacks into the water. They can also sail, with a pretty freaking good amount, which is nice. The only problem is they're not very good leaders, so that kind of sucks. And this is a theme of Cyanwood, all of their mages are mundane researchers, okay? So, and we will absolutely, we will use that to our advantage in the game that we are playing. We're going to tank our magic scales and use the shit out of it, okay? So another good thing about them is they can capture a Poliwrath each month. If you need some beef boys to go underwater with, it can be useful. But, yeah. Otherwise, not a very inspiring mage, okay? Next up is the Cyanwood City's Karateka. And this is one of our 2 kind of like everywhere mages. The other one is the Battle Girl Pearl. Okay, so the Karateka is a 1 earth, and then his focus is fire, air, earth, with a 50% chance, again, for fire, air, water, earth. Okay? So you have a chance of getting a decent mage out of this, right? You could get a earth 3, you could get an air 2, you can get a lot of combinations. Part of the problem, though, is you only get a 100% chance for fire, air, earth. Earth 2 can be useful, but earth fire and earth air really isn't very useful. And that 50% chance is high, but it's not super reliable, and it's so random on what you can get. So at the end of the day, only about 25% of these guys end up being useful in battle-oriented scenarios. Okay, the vast majority of the rest of the time they're just researchers. Again, mundane researchers. Another thing about Cyanwood City, most of them have a forge bonus, so that is useful. But we have a much better forge bonus on someone else, so we just don't care about the karatekas very much. This is a research monkey, and that's how we use them the vast majority of the time. Next up is the Battle Girl Pearl, which is a female version and slightly different paths. This one is more focused on water, whereas the karateka is more focused on fire. That's literally it. That's the difference. So I just mix and match both of them, honestly, all over the place. I'll have Battle Girl Pearls and karatekas and just go from there. So next up is the Machampion. Okay, so this can only be recruited in the capital, and it is 4 recruitment points, so it is slow to recruit. But these guys are very important, okay? And the biggest reason why they are super important is because of this 50% chance to get another level of priest, okay? These are your ability to get divine blessings. It's kind of random. Fortunately, though, the ones that you get, Earth 2 is an okay mage. It's not great, but it can Earth power, which means it's an Earth 3, and if it actually is an Earth 3, it could be an Earth 4. So, it's got built-in regeneration, or not regeneration, reinvigoration. It's sacred. These guys can actually be decent little thugs if you have a good bless for it. We don't really have a good bless for it, but if you have a good bless for it, they can be decent little thugs. The only thing that holds them back, and this is true of most of the Pokemon Champion, is that they do not have normal slots. They only have a head slot and 3 miscellaneous slots. This means it's hard to gear them out in an effective way unless they already have a very sacred bless or very strong bless. Okay, they do have many attacks, and this is going to be a theme that you see with most of the Pokemon, right? Is that you have a bunch of attacks, kind of going back to that whole concept of like Pokemon know 4 moves, etc., right? So, very important. Going to be leaders, or at least going to be with armies that to have access to the divine blessing. Okay. Next up are 2 very important mages. Again, both can only be recruited in the capital. The Battle Girl X is probably the most important mage that you have, and it's for a very specific reason. So they come out as Earth 2. They have a 100% chance at either air, water, or earth, and a 50% chance at fire, air, water, earth. Okay. And why are they important? They're important because they have a forge bonus too. Okay, so Battle Girl X's with a Dwarven Hammer make 5 cost items for 1 cost. We are middle-aged Olm. Okay, well, and late age. I think late age Olm does that too. We are the Olm of the Pokemon nations, basically. Okay, and we do it with a decent path access with fire, air, water, and earth. Okay. So with all of the elemental access, pretty reliably. Definitely the air, water, and earth is super reliable to a point. You may find out what that's all about. I had a lot of trouble getting a water, but I did eventually. And fire is the harder one to pick up, but sometimes you just get like 15 of them. So it is what it is. That is an incredibly useful mage. Not an incredibly useful battle mage necessarily, right? But an incredibly useful mage for crafting. So that is what the Battle Girl X's are super important. They are also still stealthy. Again, this is not just like a Cyanwood thing. A lot of the Pokemon nations, I think, are a little over stealthed. So that's just something that's a part of the game. Okay, last but not least is the Cyanwood City Karate King. Again, can only be recruited in the capital. This one is slow to recruit. The Battle Girl X is not slow to recruit, which is why I think this is the better mage, right? But in theory, the Karate King, they only have a forge bonus of 1, right? But they come with a much better access to fire, 2 guaranteed randoms, and a 50% random. So this is where you can get an Earth 5, right? This is where you can get a Fire 3. This is where you can get an Air 3. It's incredibly rare, I will say, but this is where you can get a little bit higher pathing. So to kind of like go back over, we have Water 1, Earth 1, Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 2, Earth 2, and a bunch of randoms. Okay, notice something. Our path, especially, our paths for especially early game, are very shallow. We do not have high paths, and pretty narrow, truth be told, right? We have Earth, and we have a general splash of the other elements. We have no death, right? We have no nature. We have no astral. We have no I don't think any of the Pokemon nations have blood, actually. But we are very shallow and we are very narrow, and that is a problem. That is a very big problem that we have to face, and that we have to spend a lot of time trying to work against or fix in the game. So that's something that we're gonna have to talk about, but we will get there. It's just a part of the nation. Okay. So I'm gonna jump to the test game real quick, and then we'll talk about our units. Okay. Okay, everyone. Here we are at the test game. So we are gonna take a look at our units real quick. So these are the units that we can actually summon, and some of these are locked to certain areas, right? Like you can only do Poliwags on coastal forts. You can only do Hitmonlees, Hitmonchans, and Hitmontops in the capital. Same with the Prodigy White Belt, which is our sacred, right? Everything else can be recruited basically everywhere else, though. And a very important thing, this is something that we haven't talked about yet, but this is inherent as a part of the mod, is this. Most, and this is Pokemon, right? Most Pokemon can evolve, right? So in Dominions, it uses the promotion tag, and many Pokemon can evolve multiple times, right? So you might have a promotion for Machops, for example. You might have a promotion at 30 experience, and then you'll have another promotion at 90 experience. That tends to be the scenario for most Pokemon. Most tier 2s are 30, most tier 3s are 90. Okay, so that's something to think about. What we're going to do is I'm actually going to, I have all of those units spaced out, and we're actually going to take a look at them individually and as what their evolutions are. So to start off, we have Mankey, right? So this is an incredibly cheap unit. If we take a look at the price for it, it's 9 gold, 1 resources, 9 recruitment points. Very, 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 very cheap unit. Okay? But it's also a very kind of crappy unit. Super low hit points, no protection, a god-awful magic resistance, and this is going to be another staple for Cyanwood, is god-awful magic resistance. Okay? And this is something that I heavily try to combat with how we play the game. All right? Because these guys are, they're the fighting bros, but it is just abysmal magic resistance. Okay? And honestly, very low strength and attack skill for something that you would consider to be fighting. Okay? The upside for them is they do have Berserker 3, so that does go up a little bit, right? And then they have a whole host of other stuff. You'll also see this. I tend to think that the majority of Pokemon units have too much stuff going on. So all of them have this bad formation fighter. Most of them are going to have evolutions. And most of them are going to have like 3 or 4 other things going on. Mankeys are not great units. Just pretty much hands down, period. Karate Chop, however, is armor piercing. So that is something. Moving on from the Mankeys into their evolved version, the Primeape. Okay, so it only takes 30 experience to get these guys up to a Primeape, which is not too hard to do, honestly. The biggest thing is to get them to survive, but there's a different thing that we'll talk about that's, again, a theme of the mod. And we'll talk about that after we talk about the units. So they get a health boost. They get a stat boost, primarily a defense stat boost, which is really nice. And they get another attack. They swap attacks, right? They don't have Scratch anymore. They have Fury Swipes instead, which is 3 attacks, which is nice. And they have Low Kick, which is actually 3 times stronger versus larger beings, which is actually pretty nice because these guys are only size 2. So a lot of things are going to be larger beings, okay? And the other really big thing about Primates, which makes them not trash, they're not a good unit, but they're not trash, is that they have Berserker 6. So in the late game, if you're not facing massive battlefield evocations and things like that are gonna insta-kill them, if you can buff their protection, like if you can Army of Lead or Army of Gold them, right? Berserker 6 actually kind of makes them tough, right? It makes them tough and it makes them a little dangerous. They have their uses, but they're not crazy good. Okay, not and why should they be, right? It's the first unit that you can get. Next up is Tyrogues, right? We're gonna kind of blitz through some of these. Not a super strong unit, kind of the same scenario as the Mankeys and Primates are, but they are stealthy. Okay, they evolve at 30 experience, and they evolve into a Hitmontop. Okay, Hitmontop actually isn't too bad. It's got decent stats, attack and defense skill. It is stealthy, so you can use these as raiders. They have a triple kick, which is 3 attacks. They have a dynamic punch, which causes confusion, which is interesting. Not great, not bad. They're super fast, so you can put them on attack rear. Kind of just whatever. Okay. Next up, we have Machops. Okay, so Machops are kind of going to be the bread and butter. However, these are non-sacred Machops, and we have a better option, okay? But this is a good concept of what the stats of the Machops are. So we'll take a look at this now so you can remember them for later, okay? So really low hit points, mediocre stats, no protection, levels at 30, okay? Has a Karate Chop, which is armor piercing, and a Low Kick, which is better against larger beings, okay? And then, so this is going to be where things kind of get interesting, right? They level. At 30, they level into a Machoke, okay? Still pretty low hit points, but suddenly they have 20 protection. Way better, significantly better, and 20 strength. Holy shit. They keep the same attacks, but those attacks now hit like trucks. A 20 damage armor-piercing Karate Chop at okay attack skill, and a 9 damage triple against larger beings. So potentially 27 damage Low Kick, and they're size 2, so pretty good. Okay. Moving from that into Machamp, absolutely baller unit, right? It does take 90 experience to get a Machamp though, so that can be difficult depending on what your plans are. Really high hit points for what they are, saves the same protection. Even higher strength, high attack, high defense skill, all around incredibly strong unit. Keeps the Karate Chop, keeps the Low Kick, both are stronger, gains a Seismic Toss, which actually buries the unit, which basically makes, I think Buried actually gives them the tag to where they basically have like no defense, so you're going to hit them every time, and they can't move. So super dangerous unit, very strong, 20 morale, 9 magic resistance. These guys cannot resist squat. So if you have an army of 200 fucking Machamps rolling around just obliterating people, watch out for the Master and Slaves, because these guys will fall to it easy peasy, like it's nothing. It's actually a really big issue. So something to consider. Okay. Next up, we've got Okay, so this is a very interesting thing, and this is kind of unique to Cyanwood City. Okay, I take that back. It's not unique to Cyanwood City, but Cyanwood City is one of only a handful of nations that really does this. Okay, and that is they have units that are Pokemon trainers. Okay, so normally the Pokemon trainers are your commanders, and the Pokemon are your units. But Cyanwood actually has Pokemon units, and they spawn their own Pokemon, right? And this is incredibly useful. I'm going to gloss through the majority of these, right? But we have a couple of different versions. We have one that does Mankeys, we have one that does Tyrogues, then we have two different versions that do Machops, right? One that is a more offensive version, basically, and one that is a more defensive version, all right? These are all incredible, and then we have Crusher Girls, which also do defensive Tyrogues, and they're stealthy. Okay, these are all incredibly interesting. Problem, or not problem. The upside is these guys spawn these units every single time, just like commanders. So if you have 50 of these Cyanwood City Ruby White Belts, right? They're not very good. You can see their stats; they're not very good, but they free spawn a Mankey every single. So you have 50 of these. That means every battle you have 50 Mankeys, and the 50 Mankeys you can leave your white belts on a hold and attack, and the Mankeys are just going to rush in while your white belts hold there. So it's this scenario where you can create these free spawn armies within armies, and it's really interesting. So let's take a look at these units real quick. We're going to pop over to our army scenario so we can take a look at them. So this is the white belts, the ones with the Mankeys. They're kind of crappy units, just like the Mankeys, but they do upgrade at 30 to summon Primates, which is, again, still not very good. However, once you get them to 90, they summon 1 Primate and 5 Mankeys every single battle. This isn't incredibly strong, but it can flood the fucking field if that's what you're trying to accomplish. It can be, again, right? If you have 50 of these Ruby Black Belts, then you have 50 Primates, and you have 250 Mankeys on the field. If you're doing battlefield-wide buffs, that can actually really be a thing. The downside is they're still Mankeys, so they still only have 5 HP. But it is something to consider. Moving on to the Fire White Belts. So these are the Tyrogues. These guys are stealthy and have a siege bonus, so they're kind of interesting. But at the end of the day, they're kind of meh. Okay. Their next up is the Fire Blue Belts. These guys turn into Hitmontops. This is far more useful for raiding, right? A 60 stealthy unit that can basically go with our stealthy commanders. Oops, wrong one. With our stealthy commanders is pretty useful. And when they upgrade for the last time, you get, again, 1 Hitmontop and 5 Tyrogues. So you can flood the field with these guys, and this is actually pretty useful. The Primapes and Mankeys, less so, but the Hitmontops are actually potentially dangerous, especially with battlefield buffs, right? You're looking at this guy, 16 hit points. If you buff up his protection, he's got decent damage, he's got decent skills. Not horrible. Next up is the Diamond White Belts, and again, these guys, the Diamond White Belts and the Shield White Belts, are basically the same. It's just the Diamond White Belts are punchy offensive boys, and the Shield White Belts are swordy shield boys. Okay, they just have naturally higher defense and protection. Okay, but they both evolve the same way and with the same things, and that is, at the beginning, they just have a single Machop. At 30 experience, they summon 1d6 Machokes. And this is where that split perspective is going to come into play. So when I chose to play Cyanwood City, I chose to play them based off of the concept that I thought being an Olmish Pokemon nation was going to be really cool. I really wanted to craft things because there's some unique Pokemon items that I like, Pokeballs and things like that I wanted to play around with. That seemed really cool to me. And then this concept of having this mid-game power spike where these guys are really weak, right? These guys are very weak. Diamond white belts and shield white belts are very weak. But if you can get 30 experience into them, they turn into powerhouses because they summon 1d6 Machokes. And so you can take 20 of these blue belts, and they're very weak as white belts, but as soon as you hit blue belts, all of a sudden, it's not just 20 Machops, it's 20d6 Machokes, which can get crazy. If you get really good rolls, you can flood the field with Machokes. And we've seen Machokes. They're an incredibly good improvement over the Machop. Really high protection, decent hit points, hits like a truck, etc. Right? So this is an interesting mid-game power spike. Which, now we go to the second perspective, which I found out well into the game is a bug and is not intended. So that's a bit unfortunate. However, there is an upside. Okay, and what I ended up doing basically is I didn't stop using my units. I just made sure I try to only use them at their final tier, because at their final tier, it goes back to being a single Machamp that gets summoned. And while that is, it's unfortunate, right? It's not as big as a power spike. The Machamp, if we remember, right, is still a beastly unit. So having 20 of these black belts free spawning 20 fresh Machamps every single battle is really, really strong. They're also decent units at this point, the black belts and the diamond black belts and the shield black belts, because every time you level them, right, they get upgraded stats. They get up to 9 bodyguard, which makes them extremely good bodyguards. 9 patrol bonus, very good patrollers. 9 castle defense bonus, extremely good at holding a fort. And 27 siege bonus. These guys just crush a fort almost instantaneously. It's crazy. Especially since this is early age, all the Pokemon nations, except for their capitals, they can only build up to the second tier of forts. So they get popped really, really easily. Okay. So, that is them. I actually didn't... We go back to recruit. I actually didn't show off the Crusher Girls because, again, I think these are bugged in that they don't evolve. So they're basically useless. They are stealthy, but they don't have great stats on their own, right? I guess they do have 15 protection. These, you could use them at the very beginning of the game, and they wouldn't be bad, right? Because they have decent protection, decent hit points, decent stats, and they do free spawn a single Tyrogue. But outside of the first couple turns, these units are worthless. So it's just kind of whatever. They do have a unique scenario where if they get hurt, they drop their armor, right? So should they take enough damage in battle, they discard their armor to get serious. They basically tank their protection and their attack stats boost, I guess. It's weird. Not a very useful unit. Next up, we have the Poliwag. Okay. We're going to go back over to here. So we've got Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Poliwrath. So the Poliwags are utter garbage. They are absolutely trash. They are 4 hit points, abysmal stats. They have a bubble attack, which does 5 damage. They're excruciatingly bad. The only thing is they have amphibian, and you can mass the shit out of them. So you can have like 200 of these guys in an instant and have them try to range things down, and you'll lose massive swaths. However, at 30 experience, right, they're going to evolve into a Poliwhirl. Still kind of a meh unit, right? Still low stats, still low hit points, no protection. But a little bit better. They have this ranged hypnosis attack, right, which they can sometimes use in melee, and they actually hit a little bit harder. But the real scenario is once they get to Polyraths. Now, these guys have 22 hit points, decent all-around stats, defense skill of 17, cold resist 15, which is nice if you're fighting in the water a bunch, right? They are amphibians, and they have a decent spread of attacks. They're not crazy good, but these guys can be useful if you need to fight people underwater. Otherwise, they're definitely not what you want. Okay. Next up. Okay, so next up, we're going to take a quick look at the. We've already looked at Hitmontops because of the Tyrogues that transform into them, right? You can only recruit one per month. However, they are. Oh, actually, Hitmontops are not very expensive. Hitmontops are okay. Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee are crap. They are also limited recruitment. You can only do one per month, and look how expensive they are. 90 gold and 90 recruitment, and there's 72 gold per year. They're excruciatingly bad. Look at their stats. What you're paying for is not represented here. They're interesting, right? The Hitmonchans have Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and Mega Punch, and that's cool because you can do a bunch of different elemental stuff, but for the price that you're paying, this needs to be like 20 strength. You need to be like punching a hole in things. And then the Hitmonlees are kind of the same stuff. The Hitmonlees are they're just absolutely better than the Hitmonchans, but they're still not worth the price. They are flyers, and they do have a bunch of interesting attacks. The rolling kick does paralyzing poison. The high jump kick has a charge bonus, and the double kick is armor piercing 2 attacks. But for 90 gold and 1 per turn, and for 72 gold per year, these are absolutely not worth it. Keep in mind, right? 90 gold, 1 per turn, you can just get Black Belt Goes, and they free spawn a Hitmonlee every battle. And they're 14 gold per year. It's an insane disparity. It's really, really bad. It's something that needs to be balanced out. And then there's one last unit, and that is our Sacred, and that's the Prodigy White Belt. And they are basically the same thing as the Shield White Belt and the Diamond White Belt. Well, basically the same thing as the Diamond White Belt, but just with slightly better stats, Sacred, and a host of fucking buffs. Right, and this goes back to the way that a lot of the Sacreds, a lot of the Pokemon units, period, are done, but this is very indicative of the Sacreds in the nations, is they get a bunch of different buffs, right? So we've got all one. We've got Shock Resistance 3, Fire Resistance 3, Cold Resistance 3, Poison Resistance 3, Air Shield 60, and Enlarged, and actually the Enlarged is because of the Bless that I have, so ignore that, right? But here's the kicker. Here's the really important thing about the white belts. They are not just like the other white belts, the diamond white belts and the shield white belts. They are not good units. They're not good units, even when they are leveled up to their highest tier. Though at black belts they're better. Actually, let's pop out and take a look at this. So we can actually take a look. So here are some black belts, okay? And they have much better hit points. They have much better stats. They have an additional attack. They actually hit pretty hard, but they are still very low protection. The upside is that, and this is the same for the white belts, blue belts, and black belts for the prodigies, your sacreds. Not only are they sacred, but the free spawn they create is also sacred. So that means my prodigy white belts at the very beginning of the game, when they summon a Machop, right? It's a sacred Machop. When they summon a Machoke, when they summon 1d6 Machokes, right? In the mid-game, those are sacred Machokes. And at the end, these are sacred Machamps. And that is an incredibly big, important deal. Okay, so we're back. I want to go over some of the things that I think are more. We've talked about all of the units now. Okay, I'm gonna go over some of the things that I think are unique about the mod, and some of the interesting, I guess, stuff within it. So one of the things I want to talk about that is a part of the mod, but it's also going to be very important for us as a nation, is the forging. Okay, so there are a bunch of unique items added into this mod, right? As you can see, there are Pokeballs. There are Pokeballs for every different element, okay? And they do what you might think they do. They give you a retinue, right? Whoever holds them, they're a weapon, single-handed weapon, so you can hold 2 of them for most units. They give you a retinue, and they also give you a chance to catch a Pokemon every month, right? So this gives you like as a nation, right? This means if I make a bunch of Pokeballs, I can start getting. I'm a fighting nation, but I can start catching electric and flying Pokemon, right? Or I can start catching rock, ground, and steel Pokemon, or I can start catching. Oh nope, I can start catching. Do I keep clicking? Is that the same thing? Oh, it says the same thing. That's incorrect. Normal or fire Pokemon, right? And the tiers change based off of the different tiers of construction. So you can have Tier 1 Pokemon, Tier 2 Pokemon, and Tier 3 Pokemon get captured. Now, the cost is pretty hefty for some of these, and the fact that it's not guaranteed, it's a pretty low % chance. But if you have, like, again, right, this goes back to the concept of Cyanwood. If you have the ability to make 5 cost items for 1 cost, we can flood our stuff with Pokeballs and get a bunch of. It's not free spawn, mind you, right? Because the Pokemon that you summon do have upkeep cost. But it can really diversify our options. Okay, so forging is a really interesting little thing that goes on there. Unfortunately, here's the downside. Many of the Pokemon nations have unique items to them that are Pokemon themed, not just the Pokeballs. Unfortunately, Cyanwood, at the time of this game starting, Cyanwood was one of the newer nations added to the mod. So even though they're kind of the Forge nation, they don't have any unique items to them yet. So unfortunately, I don't get to play around with any of that stuff. But we do still get to do all of the capabilities of what a good Forge nation would do anyways. Okay? So that's going to be a fun aspect. Now I want to take a look at research, all right? And there's a bunch of different things that I want to look into, but we're going to start with construction, because obviously this nation is going to be a very big construction thing, and this is going to tie into the concept of something that we've talked about earlier, and that's how to safely promote or evolve your Pokemon. Because in construction, and this is something that every nation has access to, right? It's just themed differently for the different nations. So because we're Earth-based and we're fighting, we get rock schools, right? Other Pokemon cities are going to be different, elements and have different names, but they all do the same thing. These kindergarten, school, high school, university, corporation are basically allow you to build a site at a location and then enter into that site to gain experience. It's a training center, basically, okay? And only one person can enter into the training site per turn, right? So if you have a kindergarten in a province, only one commander can train there with their army, right? But it scales pretty crazily. So the kindergartens give you 2 experience per turn. Rock schools give you 4 experience per turn. High schools give you 8 experience per turn. University gives you 16 experience per turn. Rock Corporation gives you 32 experience per turn. Right? So in the late game, should you get to Construction 9 and you build a Rock Corporation at a place, you can go from a brand spanking new 0 experience Pokemon to a tier 3 fully evolved 90 plus experience Pokemon in 3 turns. And that is big, because some of these Pokemon evolutions are really strong. And it's already like getting experience on units is already nice because of the bonuses that you get based off of leveling up units. And that's a regular thing in Dominions, right? Having a Thug that has 300 experience on it tends to make a kick-ass Thug because you get a bunch more attack, defense, precision, depending on what you're needing, etc. And that's really nice for these Pokemon because you're going to do the exact same thing for them. And so this is an important thing, not just for Cyanwood, for any Pokemon nation to be able to safely level their Pokemon, but this is an extreme strength for Cyanwood because it already wants to be a construction nation, right? Cyanwood already wants to rush up to level 4 construction immediately. Picking up level 5, why not? And 8 gems earlier on in the game to be able to put up a high school in your capital city and then get, because don't forget, every unit in the whole game gets 1 experience per turn just for surviving. So getting 9 experience per turn in the beginning of the game, that can get you not to 90, but that can get you to that 30 experience threshold really quickly. And that can be very, very important. So construction is a huge deal for all of the Pokemon nations, but especially for Cyanwood City. Okay. So next up we have the construction stuff. And this is stuff that I'm not a huge fan of, but they're interesting things, okay? You're going to see that there's a bunch of like I choose you or blank appears, right? And so the I choose yous are in battle summon spells like Horde of Skeletons or Swarm or something like that, right? But they are various different. You start off very weak, right? 20 fatigue, range of 5, summon a Mankey, right? So you can have an Earth one just go Mankey, 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 Mankey. Pretty crap. But on the flip side, if you actually head down, right, all the way to the end, you can do for a Earth 5 and 3 gems, you can do a Hitmon team let's go, right? So you will summon 6 Hitmonchans into a fight. It says hit summons Machoke, so I don't know. However, I have found that these tend to be very overpriced and not very effective. The Mankeys, like the level 1s and level 2s, tend to be free, but crap. It's the middle ground where things start to get a little bit better, right? And that's in the concept of things like Mankey Team Let's Go, right? Because this is free, but it does summon 6 Mankeys, so if you need to flood a place, this can be really useful. Or if you get into the scenario of... where are they at? Machop teams, right? So like a Machop team can be decent, etc., etc. But I don't use these a lot, and I don't like them very much. I think they're, at least for Cyanwood City, I think they're a little blah. The other set, right, the ritual set, are remote assassinations. So in the beginning, you can sick for 4 gems. You can 4 province away, sick a Hitmontop on someone. You can sick a Machoke on someone, right? You can sick a Hitmonchan on someone. And I think that's the final one. Yeah, for Cyanwood, the top remote assassination is a wild Hitmonchan. Is not very good. And honestly, the best one is probably still the very first one, is the Hitmontop, because they're so fast, right? But they're also super expensive. The different Pokemon nations have different remote assassination. You'll see that in the game as we show up. Some people have much better assassination options than we do. So that is something that we will have to deal with, but not something that we will use much, if ever. This is expensive to try to use something like this consistently, especially for a nation who wants to be using their earth gems for a lot of other stuff. So that's Conjuration. There's nothing special for us, or I think any Pokemon Nation in Alteration. Nothing special for anyone, I think, in Evocation. We've already seen Construction. Enchantment actually has a special thing for us specifically. I think one other nation gets this, maybe. There are a couple of other more unique spells throughout that other nations get. We get Fighting Field, which is basically a anti-magic. Okay? As you have seen, the magic resistance on our units is absolutely abysmal. So this is a pretty useful buff at level 4 enchantment that allows us to try to deal with that somewhat. It's basically the exact same thing as anti-magic. Same cost, same levels, everything. But we don't get astral, so this is how we deal with that, which is needed, basically. Okay, there's no blood magic for Pokemon, so that's nothing. Thaumaturgy is where we get some other unique stuff, okay? And I think this is for every nation. They are going to get basically spawning units, right? Ritually cast shiny captures. And shiny in Pokemon context means it's going to be a sacred unit. So for 1 gem, we can summon a sacred Machop, okay? It's not very good. Same with the Machokes. You get Hitmonlees, they're not sacred. It has to say shiny. We get down here to the 4 gems for a shiny Machamp. And it's just not worth it, right? When we can do something like Prodigy Black Belts, which are going to spawn a Machamp every battle on their own, spending 4 gems for a Machamp is just absolutely not worth it. However, we get into some other things as we get down here, right? You see this Celestial Step Exploration, Future Fist Exploration, Sensei's Divining Top Exploration. Okay, so what are these? These are unique to every different nation. Every different Pokemon nation is going to have different ones of these, but they're all kind of flavored similarly, right? So these allow you to build sites, okay, for a decent amount of gems, but each site does something unique, right? So this Celestial Step, right, will allow you to have, you can only have 1, but it will allow you to recruit Hitmonlees there and increase the range of air and fire. Future Fist, only castable in highlands and mountains. You can have, you can recruit Hitmonchans, and they will generate 1 Earth Gem in perpetuity, which is amazing. Sensei's Divining Top will let you get Hitmontops, can only be done in forests, and it increases the luck for the province. Only in wastelands, Machamps and Machokes, plus extra taxes, which is kind of meh, because it's wastelands, but, you know. And then you have Spiral Arena, which is Poliwhirls and Poliwraths, and increasing the range of earth and water, but this can only be done normal. Okay? So those are really interesting things, and like I said, this is different for every single nation, so that's going to be a unique thing that we get to play around with. Okay? But as we get down further, and this is something that I just want to show off because I think it's super cool, right? You see things like Awakened Snorlax, and we get into Thaumaturgy 7 and 8, and you see all of these quests for legendary Pokemon, and these are expensive, right? But these are uniques, right? And if you get them, the legendary Pokemon, and this is kind of like the same with the Pretender Pokemon, right? Any Pokemon that is kind of like classified as an Awake Pretender, so any of the legendaries, they all have battlefield. They all have buffs that they start every battle with, right? So Celebi, for example, right, starts every battle by casting Mass Regeneration. That's incredibly powerful. If you can get to Thaumaturgy 7 and you can spend 40 gems on having the only Celebi in the game, that is incredibly niche and interesting and powerful. And you've got so many of them. So many of these legendary Pokemon between Thaumaturgy 7 and Thaumaturgy 8. Fucking Snorlax is kind of like a semi-legendary, so they don't quite count. But this is it's really interesting. It's just something I wanted to point out. So okay, that is about it as far as search and everything. So I think we want to talk about pretender design now. Okay, so we are at pretender design. And this is our pretender. Cameron the photographer, the giant storm badge, okay? So this is an immobile pretender. And we've gone kind of a rainbow, not a full rainbow, but kind of. And this is an incredibly generic bless, but we are trying to accomplish some super specific things. What I want to do going into this game, or what I wanted to do going into this game, because I'm talking with experience far into the future from where I started. What I wanted to go into this game doing was I wanted to have very good skills, because I wanted to be able to afford a lot of different Pokemon. I wanted to be able to experiment and recruit Pokemon, because not only do we have the Pokemon from our nation, every province, almost every province, has Pokemon as well, right? So there are just wild Pokemon out there that you can recruit. You can just conquer a province that'll have Sand Slashes in it and start recruiting Sandshrews, right? And in order to make use of that type of stuff, I really wanted to make sure that I had good scales and was going to be able to achieve a good economy. I didn't want to have a crazy bless build that would only be able to like one-trick pony, okay? I wanted to make sure that I had my bases covered, I would have good scales, I would be able to make use of any sacreds that I came upon, but I wouldn't have to rely on them, and I'd be able to diversify, use a bunch of Pokeballs, make a bunch of gear, have a bunch of different experiments going on, right? Like try out this group of Pokemon, try out that group of Pokemon, etc., etc. And that's why I kind of settled on what I have here, right? What we've got is generally a defensive bless, right? Minor shock resistance, minor cold resistance, minor poison resistance, okay? Swiftness and defense gives us actual defense, which just helps some of our survival. Larger, because specifically a lot of the Pokemon, especially the lower tier Pokemon, have very, very low health. That is one thing that has kind of stood out about the Pokemon units. Now, not the commanders. A lot of the Pokemon commanders have very high health, right? Especially some of the legendaries. But the regular units, like, it takes us until we get Machamps for a unit to break out of the 20 HP range. Larger gets us there far faster, and it helps with some of the other issues that we have, okay? In addition to just giving a bunch of strength. And then we have major magic resistance and minor magic resistance. We have +3 magic resistance because the magic resistance for Cyanwood City is absolutely abysmal. And we had to do something to try to work it out. Our other option here, and this is a big fucking deal. It's a really big deal. Our other option is taking magic weapons, because our units don't have magic weapons, like any of them. And I say that our Poliwhirls, Poliwraths, and our Hitmonchans do, okay? But those aren't units that we can really rely on very, kind of bad units. So not having magic weapons is a very big deal. I decided to go for the magic resistance though, because I can work around the no magic weapons through thugs and through other Pokemon, right? I can just recruit other Pokemon from other provinces that do have magic weapons, and there are a ton of them. There are dozens of Pokemon that have magic weapons all over the place, and I want to experiment with them, and I think that'll be really cool. That it is still potentially going to be a weakness, one that I'm acutely aware of. but it was a conscious choice to try to go for the magic resistance to compensate instead. So that is our god. He is imprisoned, right? We're not going to be seeing him for quite some time. But once he shows up, he is going to guarantee us some paths, because we probably aren't going to have air for. We'll probably have water for by the time he shows up, but we're probably not going to have air for. We might have water for. We'll probably have earth for, sure, but we definitely aren't going to have astral for or nature for by the time he shows up. I do wish that I had gone for death, blood, and fire. Especially blood, basically. I think most of the nations have decided, oh, it would have been really nice if any of us had taken blood. And I think some people did. I think some people did some rainbow pretenders that have 3 blood, but it just, no one's really gotten super deep into it. Another thing that we've done is we have very high dominion. And the reason why we have very high dominion strength is because I want as many prodigies as we can get. Now, it's not because we're trying to rely on our sacreds, but it's because even if we didn't have a bless, those are still by far our strongest units. Okay? And that's the whole concept of like getting that fighting force up to tier 2, right? To where they start summoning 1d6 Machokes, and then tier 3 where they summon a Machamp, is absolutely the main goal for the early to mid game, 100%. So we want to have as many of those as we can. Another reason why I did this very generic bless is because, and this is, I fought myself on this for a while because I really wanted to do a more specific bless to the prodigies. But one of the reasons why we have such a generic bless is because there are a bunch of other sacred Pokemon that you can get. Butterfrees are sacred, and you can just find them in provinces and recruit them. Well, not the Butterfrees, but Caterpies, and then you can level them up, right? Same things with Pidgeys, right? You can just find them and level them up. Nidorinos, Nidorans, Nidorinos, Nidokings, Nidoqueens, right? They end up being sacred. There are a bunch of different sacred units that you can get your hands on that we could amass, and that I wanted to have a sufficiently generic bless for, so that they could benefit from it, right? And again, right, I wanted good scales. So this is what we kind of landed on. This is where we're at. And I think that's probably the wrap up for Cyanwood City. So I'm gonna be airing episodes of this game. For the short term, they should be pretty consistent. These should go up. I think these should go up every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday for the foreseeable future. Because they're replacing the time slot for something that's already completed. But should we begin to catch up, because like I said, we are very far into the game, but should we start to catch up, then I might have to pull back on airing the episodes. We're 50 plus turns into it already, but sometimes we have to pause the game for a little while. Sometimes, you know how it is with the menu. So that is something that is out there, and I just want to be forthcoming. I also want to throw this out there, and I probably should have said this at the beginning of this video. So if you've made it all the way to the end, thank you. And I want to give you this heads up. I am not an expert in Dominion. I have been playing this game for about 2.5 to 3 years at this point. And I've put a lot of time and effort into it, but I'm still relatively new to the multiplayer scene. I have a handful of games under my belt. I am going to make mistakes. I'm going to do stupid things. And I'm gonna get annoyed at some things here or there. And some of the things are gonna be mod based, and some of the things are gonna be people based, and some of the things are gonna be dominions based. However, I keep coming back to the game, and I keep coming back to the mod, because it's incredibly fun. And I have had such a blast playing the mod and playing the game. So if this interests you at all, please, 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 I do plan on having links in the description below to at least the mod creators' information. Okay? So if this interests you at all, please hit Onard up. They've done a fantastic job with this mod, a lot of work, and they deserve some praise and recognition. And you deserve to play this awesome mod in this awesome game. So I hope this wasn't too long-winded. I apologize. I covered a lot of stuff that I probably didn't need to, but I hope you enjoy the episodes as they go forward. I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.